Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Detroit-based jazz drummer Gayelynn McKinney. We caught up with her about her latest 2021 CD, Zoot Suit Funk. These days, she reigns as one of the most accomplished drummers in Detroit. Her father was the legendary jazz pianist and composer Harold McKinney, who once played with Billie Holliday, while her mother was a notable singer. The drums came to her. She began playing at the age of 2 in her dad's basement, and she never stopped. Her career is always full of goodness and bravado. Enjoy the story.
Thanks for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Let's start out with Zoot Suit Funk here, and I just kind of want to know, before we get into kind of the artistic end of this, it comes out during a pandemic, a very strange and surreal time on the planet. Talk to me about the timing of this release and how you feel about it.
Well, I was supposed to release it in 19, but, actually, no, I take that back. I finished it in 19. That's when I finished the CD. And I was actually going to release it in 2020. And I was under advisement from a few people. They was like, no, don't release it this year. Don't release it this year. So I decided to wait and release it in January of 21. It's a horrible time to release anything. But on the other hand, I felt like it was a CD that people would enjoy listening to. Because music is, let's face it, some of the things that got us through the pandemic was music. People just being able to listen to some music and see some music online. As musicians, we all had to become innovative and try to figure out, okay, how can we keep doing what we're doing? And one of those ways, of course, was going virtual and doing stuff online. So I said, I figured it was a nice time to release it, to keep new music flowing, and have people looking for music to listen to and hear. And this CD was mainly a CD that I wanted to put out that just made people feel good, and if it make you, do whatever you're doing in your house better, that was the purpose for the CD in the first place, and the music that I decided to put in there. Yeah.
Is that kind of what's your general approach with releases? Is that kind of what you're going for?
Well, my general approach when I thinking of releasing the CD is usually I like spring. Spring is usually a nice time for stuff to come out. Of course, this didn't come out in the spring, but it's still circulating, so to speak. So generally, I like spring as a fresh time of year. And also people are starting to go outside as the weather warms up, which, of course, wasn't a factor before. The thought of it's warming up, so now we can go outside. Usually it didn't matter, because people are starting to go outside. I'm thinking, well, there's some venues that are actually doing things outside. There's a couple of few festivals that are still trying to do things as long as it's outside. So my thought was, if it's, moving around and circulating in the springtime, then maybe, hopefully, it also generate a few show dates and gigs outside gigs this summer. So that's my general thought for this release. And for most releases, I think about the timing of it when it can come out, and also in conjunction with doing festivals and, out-of-town club dates.
So you have quite a history in your family of music. Your father was a pianist and composer, once played with Billie Holliday, and your mom was a singer. Talk to me a little bit about growing up in Detroit, just kind of your history of getting into music.
Well, you were correct. Both my parents were musically inclined. And so that's all I think I was steeped in it before I was even born. I was, while my mother was carrying me, there was music going on. And so growing up in my household was quite musical. I woke up every morning to the sound of my mother singing opera in the kitchen. And or she might be singing Carmen, a song from Carmen. So that's what I woke up to her doing. And he was in another room composing his 64-page sonata that he finally did finish. It took him it seemed like it took half my lifetime for him to finish that 64-page sonata.
Wow.
And I mean, because I'm telling you, I was probably, I think I was probably in my early 20s when he finally finished it. And he started it, I think, when I must have been about 10 or 9 years old, you know. So he was working on that. So it'd be this wonderful combination of, oh, it's quite the combination going on in the house. But that's what I woke up to every morning. And and then throughout the day, later on in the evening, or not even the evening, I would say early afternoon, these pile of musicians would start filing into the house for rehearsal with Dad, and that included Marcus Belgrave, Wendell Harrison, sometimes Phil Ramlin, Edward Gooch, and George Davison was the drummer. I would be right up there in the mix of things if I wasn't. Well, there was two things I would be doing. If I wasn't sitting next to George Davison's feet, looking at what his feet and hands were doing on the drums, Ed Gooch would bring his trombone over for me to play with. He had an extra one, and I would go in the basement or in another room. If they would either rehearsing in the dining room or the basement. So if they were in the basement, I'd be in the dining room blowing on his trombone and playing around with that. I'm amazed he trusted me, but I guess he knew that I knew how to handle instruments and not to be rough with them or anything. So that's what I did most days in the afternoon, was to sit at George's feet. Mostly that's what I was doing, and watching everything he was doing on the drums. And then when rehearsal was over, I would wait for George patiently to leave, because he would leave his drum set over my house. So I would wait very patiently until he got in his car. And as soon as he turned that corner, I would jump on those drums. And I would play on them, and I would tell my father, I was like, Daddy, I'm George Davison. And he was like, well, that's nice, honey, but I want you to be Gayelynn McKinney. And I was like, okay, then, I'm Gayelynn McKinney. So that's what most days were like in my household, is just music constantly 24/7. So I honestly don't know what else I would have been doing, except for a brief moment of when I got really interested in computers and thought I'd try getting into computer programming. But but that ended when I went to college, and my professor at the time, or my counselor at the time, who had little faith in computers at that time, that lets you know how long ago that was, said that I should just concentrate on doing music, because I was going to try to have a double major in computers and music. He said, no, you should just do music. And I listened, unfortunately, and did not pursue the computer career, because I could have done both. And I just stuck to music, which was fine. It was fine. I'm glad I stuck with just the music, but it would have been nice to have done both too, considering where computers ended up going. I just was immersed in the music at a very young age. Dad had records he had I listened to everything in his house, from the French composer Debussy to the Beatles. He had Pink Floyd, which The Wall is one of my favorite records. He had Motown. He had Herbie Hancock. Thrust is one of my favorite songs and records. And so he had all these records that I would also listen to as well. So my background in music was really, really diverse, because I had listened to really all kinds of music. And that's what he told me as well. He said, if you're going to play music for a living, make sure that you don't put yourself in a box. Try to learn as many styles as you can. And that's how he thought about music. He liked all kinds of music. If it was good, he liked it. So that's
right
pretty
on.
much how I grew up.
Talk to me a little bit about, you did variety of instruments. Why was it the drums that you landed on?
That's a good question, too. First of all, drums was, I think, it chose me, I think, because my my mother told me a funny story about her and my dad were sleeping, and my father had his back up against my mother's stomach, and he woke up to the feeling of somebody tapping him on the back. So he woke up and woke my mother up and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And she said, "I don't know what you're talking about." She went back to sleep, and then it happened again. So he woke her all the way up. "Gwen, what's going on? Why are you tapping me?" And she said, "That's not me. That's the baby." So apparently I was quite busy even while she was caring with me, moving around and moving my hands and feet. So naturally when I came out, as soon as I could put two things in my hand and beat on something, that's what I started doing. So in that case, I think the drums chose me, but I chose the saxophone once I became, when I got in school. You know, most kids start out on the clarinet. Clarinet was cool. I liked that. But when I saw that big, shiny saxophone, gold saxophone, I said, ooh, I want to play that. So at about 6th grade, I started playing around with the saxophone. At first, I started with the tenor because my father's friend, Farik Zubay, brought his tenor. He had an extra tenor. He brought it over and said, "Hey, she can use this." And it was cool, but it was too big at the time for me. So when I got to, I saw the alto, and I said, "Ooh, that's nice. It's smaller too." So I started playing alto in 6th grade, and then my father took me to the store one day and bought me a Yamaha alto saxophone, which I still have. And so from 6th grade all the way through 12th grade, I was playing saxophone in the concert band and in the marching band, and I was playing drums at home. And then when I got to high school, I actually did start playing drums in the jazz band. So I was playing the saxophone in the concert band and playing drums in the jazz band in high school. So I was going to continue to play the saxophone because I joined a band when I became a teenager called Foresight here in Detroit, and a friend of mine was on the drums, so I was playing the saxophone. And we started doing club dates around the city. And I actually got a write-up in the paper one day about me playing saxophone. So I was enjoying doing that. But then when I got to college, that's where the drums completely took over. I was going to actually continue to play sax. And they heard me play the drums. And they said, "Well, actually, we want you to play the drums." So that's when the saxophone got laid to rest, and the drums became my primary instrument.
So over your career, you played with a lot of head people, and I'm sure you learned quite a bit from Roy Hargrove and Benny Golson all the way down the line. What did you take from these people, these big names and luminaries and legends, and in turn use to teach younger players that you're around?
Well, I'm going to tell you one of the most important people I met. I don't know if you've ever heard this. I've talked about it many times. As far as drummers and drumming goes, one of the most important people I met in my life when I was 10 years old there's a little story. I'm going to make it brief, but this man came to my house, and I noticed he had a stick bag, and I obviously had not seen him before because I knew all the Dad's Detroit drummers, so this guy I didn't know. And I followed him to the dining room, and he opened up his stick bag, and I asked him, could I have his sticks, because there was a red pair of drumsticks in there that I saw and wanted. So I just, kids are brave. So I asked him, could I have those sticks? And he said, "You want my sticks?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What you going to do with my sticks, girl?" I said, "I'm going to play with them." And so he said, okay. And so he said, "Okay, well, he's here. I want you to listen to me. And if you listen to me, you can take these sticks." And I said, "Okay." So he said, "I want you to remember the melodies of every song." I said, "The melodies?" He said, "Yes, the melodies." And I said, well, why? Because it wasn't computing. Drums and melodies, that wasn't computing in my head. Saxophone and melody, yeah, but drums and melodies, that wasn't computing. I said, "Well, why?" Because I played the drums. He said, yeah. He said, drummers, they always only think about the rhythm. They never think about the melody. He said, if you think about the melody and learn the melodies, you'll learn the song better, and when you solo, people will know where you are. I said, okay. And I let that roll around in my head for a few seconds. And then there was a moment of silence, and I tapped on the shoulder, and I said, hey, can I have those sticks? He said, go on, girl, take these sticks and get out of here. So I took those sticks, and I played with them until they were a pile of wood chips on the floor. And so fast forward 7 years later, I'm 17, and I'm starting to hang out with my drumming friends and musician friends, and we're looking at these jazz books and figuring out who players are and this and that. And my eyes, as I was flipping through this jazz book with my friend, stopped on this drummer. And I looked at that picture, and I looked at my friend, and I said, oh, my God. He said, what's the matter? I said, this guy gave me drumsticks when I was 10 years old. And he said, oh, you lying. He didn't give you any drumsticks. I said, I'm telling you, this is the man. He gave me the drumsticks when I was 10 years old. Well, that man turned out to be Max Roach.
Wow.
Yep, and he told me some valuable advice that I'm sure he thought went in one ear and out the other, but it didn't. It stuck with me it's an integral part of my playing. And the footnote to the story is, fast forward another 10 years or so, I still play with a group actually called Straight Ahead, and we were signed to Atlantic Records at the time, and we ended up opening for him. And so when I saw him at the sound check, I walked up to him, and I said, I know you don't remember me because this was a long time ago. I said, and before I could finish, he said, oh, yeah, I remember you. You, that little girl, took my drumstick. And I said, you remember that? He said, oh, yeah, I remember that. You're Harold McKinney's daughter. I remember who you are. And I said, well, I just wanted to let you know that the advice that you gave me at that time has stuck in my head. And to this day, I know melodies of many, many, many songs. I may not know titles all the time, but melodies, you hum a few bars, I probably know it. And it just became a really important part of my playing, which I now pass along to my students about knowing the melody of the song. And it also makes you listen more too. When you're a drummer and you listen to the melodies when you're sitting behind a band, it makes tune in to every instrument that's playing, and it allows you to interact differently instead of just listening with the rhythm. If you listen with the melody, you interact differently with the other members of the band than if you're just listening rhythmically. So that's one of the things that I've passed on to my students, thanks to Max Roach. And as far as Benny Golson, well, mainly just listening to his stories, what I got from him is his business sense. And I hate to say, a lot of musicians in that era, and even today, it's better today, but in that era especially, didn't have a business sense, which means a lot of times they lost out on royalties and monies, because they just didn't know. But Benny was one of the few guys in the business that had a business mind. And so what I got from him, from listening to his stories on stage and and in the dressing room, is his business sense and how he made music work for him, and how he one of the stories was about one of his most famous tunes, and he said when he started writing Killer Joe, he was in the living room and he was playing the same two chords over and over and over again for hours, and his wife finally came out from wherever she had been in the house, and she was putting her coat on, really, really hurrying up and putting her coat on, and it was winter time. He's like, well, honey, where you going? She said, I can't take it anymore. I just can't take it. I got to get out of here. You've been playing those same two chords for hours. So she left, and then so when she came back, by the time she came back home, he had finished the song. He played it for her. She said, what do you think? She said, it's too monotonous. It'll never sell, right? And so he said, very casually, he said, yeah, well, 4 fur coats later.
Wow.
So apparently that song did sell. But
Yeah.
not only did it sell, but he had the business sense that every time it was re-recorded, he, of course, he got royalties for that. And he said that song has been recorded like over 500 times. So, that's one of the things that I took away from him. And just playing with somebody that's that seasoned and a legend, that playing with him taught me a different way of playing too. It's a more relaxed and musical way to play behind him. Just a different kind of energy. It's not all the chops and all of that kind. It's just groove. Grooving, swinging, and grooving with him. And you don't have to do a whole lot of chopping and all that kind of stuff. It's just chilling. It's kind of like a chill vibe, but it's grooving real hard.
Yeah.
And not to say that he doesn't want you to show your skills, because he does. He will let you, he wants you to take a solo and show your skills. So you have to have those skills too. But for the most part, it's just, you just grooving, and chilling with him. And that's what I got from playing with him, because he's a seasoned musician. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Well, I'm a musician that's still, I'm not where I would like to be yet. I think I'm kind of a late bloomer. I've been a side musician for a long time now, and I'm just now kind of actually the first time I tried my voice out was in 2006 when I released "It's About Time," and that was a little experimentation of trying to combine jazz with drum machine, basically. I was trying to experiment with a modern approach to jazz, and that was cool. It was a good release and a learning lesson for me. But I think I think I'm not where I want to be. I want to step out there as Gayelynn McKinney more now, to reach a different plateau of my career than I have been, and so that's where I am now. I feel like I'm not where. Like I said, I'm not where I want to be personally, musically. To me, as far as success level, so to speak. So that's what I'm reaching for now, a different kind of success level.
Beautiful. Gayelynn, thank you for opening up about the album and about your history and your life in music. I really appreciate you taking some time out for Neon Jazz today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview. We give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Detroit, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Gayelynn for her time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.